Good morning, listeners and viewers, and welcome to my podcast, Slaves to the Algo. My name is Suresh Shankar, founder and CEO of Crayon Data. And I'm delighted to have today with me Ian Miles from Area 51. That's a story, and Ian will explain that to you. But Ian is a wonderful person to have on it because he actually is an industrial designer. He calls himself a creative generalist. I see him as a very eclectic person who started off very much like me as a right brain person who's now very much into how he uses the left brain and technology, and therefore an extremely fascinating person to have with us here today to talk about how algorithms are taking over our lives. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Good. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the invite.
And Ian, how would you describe yourself? I mean, I did my introduction, but what would you say about yourself when you meet people? And tell us about Area 51 and the name.
Area 51 was started when I turned 51. And my wife has always thought of me as a bit of an alien anyway. When I lived in the US, my immigration card, my green card status said resident alien. That's their term for foreigner. And I thought that's actually nicer. You call someone a foreigner, it's like slightly negative. You call someone alien, that's just a bit more interesting. And I've always loved the science fiction aspect of extraterrestrial life. So it seemed as good an idea as any. Industrial design was called the trade to be the jack of all trades, master of none. And that is certainly what's required if you're trying to figure out how to bring hardware into production. And of course, over the last 30 years, as we've all grown digitally, you have to learn more and more skills. And for me, I'm just naturally curious. I got a very energetic mind. It never rests. Some people think I've got attention deficit disorder, and I tell them that's how I make a living. It's just because I like to be involved in lots of different things. I like to know how things work, and I like to put things together and try and make new things happen. And so the long career path has allowed me to try my hand at lots of different things, which keeps me eternally moving forward. So it's I just try and solve problems for people, whatever they are.
That's very interesting when you talk about attention deficit disorder, because in some ways, the algorithms that are running our digital lives in ways that we don't know it today are completely changing the quality of our attention and the type of attention that we have.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start by asking a very interesting question for me personally. Could you tell me some algos that are taking over our lives as people or as consumers that we don't even know about, the best illustrations of things that our algos are insidiously creeping their way into everything that we're doing?
Well, large and small. I suppose we don't need to spend time on the big obvious ones that are newsworthy in media, but I have spent plenty of time looking at Cambridge Analytica, looking at social media, understanding their heavy and aggressive use of algos. But I'm not a gamer, but I occasionally indulge myself in a new challenge. I learned how to play backgammon a couple of years ago. And it's my favorite thing to do when I'm just trying to relax a little bit. And I've realized even this backgammon game has got a pretty serious machine learning component to it. And I thought I was getting pretty good at the basic level, so I upped it a few more notches. And then it's a very kind of linear, logical. It's in the same class of games as chess and checkers and Go. And of course, we should all be familiar with the story of AlphaGo, pushing the envelope on general AI. But I've even found in small ways, even games like backgammon, this machine is using my techniques against me. So it's learned me in a way, and it's learning the tactics against me. I mean, that's a really small, simple, kind of obvious one. The selection algorithms that do predictive stuff in Netflix and YouTube, where I do spend too much time, I'm finding they're just a little too efficient. I'm missing the randomness of discovery, which was really quite nice about the early days of Google. PageRank's the most famous algorithm in the world, right? And there was this accidental stumbling upon, which is akin to being in a library, where you're looking for something, and then you find something, oh, that's interesting, to the left or the right, or what I would call the adjacencies. And sometimes the adjacencies are more interesting than your primary objective. And so I do like a little bit of randomness in life, and so I'm disappointed when when the algos are getting too efficient, and they're actually becoming repetitive in a way. through that type of efficiency. So that's a general.
It's interesting you talk about the randomness of discovery, and because I remember many years ago, Eric Schmidt talked about how they're trying to build a serendipity engine. I mean, serendipity is all about the randomness of discovery.
It is, yeah.
And that's completely, now it seems that business models, whether you're in social media or in Google, have taken over, and that is repeated. Just go and say, who's the guy and what do I target, and do that rather than ensuring the serendipity of discovery.
Yeah.
So it's obviously not a technology problem. It's more a business model problem. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would say that, because I think you've got to question whose interests they are serving. And I quote Steve Jobs frequently. He says, you've got to start with the customer experience and work back towards the technology, not the other way around. And I just spent so much time in technology. Technologists think they're driving the world. And I think, well, really, it's your customers that are making an economic event happen. So you need to be looking after them, not just trying to advance how clever your technology is. And so that type of efficiency, I think, can cost you users. We're definitely living in an attention deficit age. I think screens and internet has driven that. We must have far shorter attention spans. There's an immediacy we expect from being super connected, and we grumble when an internet speed is too slow. But I do think this year, like no other year, has taught us to kind of slow down a little bit, maybe go a little bit deeper, instead of covering many topics in as much time as possible. The efficiency of working inside big corporations. I think some things you just need to go a little bit deeper on in order to have a more meaningful effect in the design. So I think, this year is a very interesting year to reflect on everything. It's a particularly interesting year to reflect on, I think, some of the aggressive efficiencies that machine learning is being used for.
Before we get to that, Ian, and that's going to be a topic I want to really get into. It's another interesting thing for me is that you're seeing how algos are taking over the way we are working, and you consult with people on this stuff. And you've been a banker, you've been in the telecom industry, you've been in a variety of different industries, right? So can you tell me how work itself is changing and how people inside companies are becoming more and more reliant on algorithms? And how that's changing the way decisions are being made inside companies?
Yeah, well, my lens into algos and AI generally is through the educational space, and we've seen a tremendous bloom in the last 3-4 years. The best explanation to me is that we're generating so much data, there's not enough humans to process it. So that's what's driven AI to process the data, and so a client of mine who supported me at a conference here in Singapore, 2017, we did a one-day event as part of the FinTech Festival called Identity and AI. And identity is my big passion. I think it's a huge problem. We've tried to raise capital around this before, and we decided just to do a conference. We added AI into the mix to make it interesting. Well, the client did a workshop, and that day after his workshop, he decided to pivot his entire business as an educational technologist away from STEM and just do AI for absolute beginners. And because what he'd observed is that there's this massive shortfall in the understanding of what AI is, what machine learning does. Do we go back to high school math to revisit the algorithms that most of us probably haven't looked at algorithms since we were at high school, unless you journey up through the computer science realm. But there was a strong felt need to reset, rethink, demystify, debunk the fears. So we've been looking at it through the lens of education more than anything else. So I'm not a coder. My math is patchy. I'd give myself a C+. I kind of hit my ceiling second year at college when we're doing mechanical calculations. But I have been revisiting math. I've been rediscovering it, and I have been doing a little bit of coding, but really just to understand the fundamentals as to how you apply it in society. One of the great learnings that we're getting that cascades down from the National Health Service in the UK. And they're mandating that AI is explainable. Transparency in publishing is not enough, because most of us don't understand it. Even if we were to give an average person in the street a sheet of Mozart's scratchings, we wouldn't understand any of it. So there's a very small percentage of people actually understand the math behind the coding and the statistics and the predictive analytics to give you a percentage of an outcome that you might be looking for. But you can still explain it to people. You don't have to have that PhD level capacity to write that level of math. And so the National Health Service, which is a huge influencer, is mandating explainable AI. So if AI is going to act on you in any way, shape, or form, you must be made aware of that. And you must have it explained to you at a level that you can understand it. And I think
that's fascinating. If I could go a little bit deeper and ask you a question, medicine is something that we don't often talk about, but
happy to.
Often in the old days, we just trusted the doctor. Now we ask the doctor questions, the doctor tells you something, then you move from there to Googling for everything. So when the NHS, which is probably the world's, in some ways the world's
one of the biggest
benchmark of giving public health care, says explainable AI, what do they mean? I mean, are they saying that doctors are going to get the benefit of AI to explain to the patient? What exactly do they mean by explainable AI?
It's called XAI. And I think it's a little bit more than, it wasn't that long ago. It was maybe the 70s. It was legislated that every package had to have the ingredients on it. Now, how many people are looking at the ingredients? A few of us.
Nice analogy.
Make choices, but that had to be legislated into being. The manufacturers didn't want to give up their recipes. They didn't, whether it's like shampoo or, carbonara sauce, they didn't want to reveal. But it was legislated, you will explain to the public what's inside that. And then it's up to you to get educated on what is salt doing to my body, what is, so much sugar, oh my goodness. But at least putting it there, that's transparency, that's one thing. Then beyond that, explainable AI really requires someone, a good teacher who's able to understand how to take something complex and without muddying it in metaphor, explain it so that your average person can say, okay, I now know how the telco is using my data. Okay, I now know how the bank is predicting my monthly average based on income and outgoings. And once people have got the fundamentals, they're far more comfortable with it. Or if they've got an issue, then they'll go a little bit further into that. So in a hospital, if you're about to get a procedure and there's a certain amount of risk around that procedure, you'll get counsel from the physicians who will say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. You don't have to understand the inner workings of your heart or your lung or whatever operation you're undergoing, but they do go through that. It's an ethical practice to explain to you, we're doing this, we'd like you to sign off on this so you fully understand and you're comfortable with what we're doing. And if you're not, then we'll try another path. But as professionals, we believe you should do this. So
I'm just going to go one level deeper into that question. So where does the AI come in? So the doctor's in you, he's about to operate on you, he's going to do a procedure. So what happens? I mean, is that the AI is popping up and saying, hey, you got to tell these things, here are the 10 things, or give him a sheet of paper to the patient. So is it a human plus machine kind of a thing when we talk about explainable AI?
I'm a big believer in human plus. Really, the hospitals in the US that are doing predictive analytics, when people are entered into the emergency trauma, they will quickly gather metrics, try and find whatever medical records might be available about you, and it'll predict if you're going to be alive or dead in 30 days. Now, that's kind of scary information, but the hospital then uses that augment to the best of the doctors appreciate that type of, because they've been harvesting this information for years. And this at 96% accuracy today. It's just going to get better with more data. And so the doctors are saying, wow, it's worse than I thought. We better think about it differently. Or, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. Or they maybe want to check it again. But having that supplemental vast amount of information that you can draw upon, it's got to improve medicine. And I think every doctor, whatever ego is involved, would happily take a second opinion from an AI rather than a competitor in the same realm. So I think that, and the AI is going to consume more than a single human can consume in their lifetime.
And But you're kind of bringing it, I mean, there's the doctor and there's the patient and there's the machine or the AI in between. But I'm also thinking about it as a patient, right? When I wanted to sign up for the 23andMe service, I asked myself, do I really want to know whether I'm going to get the disease? Or am I happily, blissfully ignorant? When I get it, I'll handle it.
No, it's, that is a great example. And there's lots of funny anecdotes around that for the beer you promised me. But it's, yeah, I mean, those are choices. Some people just like, I don't want to know, just do what you need to do. And other people, I think most of us reasonably saying, explain it to me one more time, or just help me understand what's going on. And then, of course, there'll be the super curious minds that want to really just keep going and say, well, how do you know this? Where did you get that information? What data set has been fed in to tell you that 3,000 people who've got the same condition as me had this spectrum of outcomes?
No, and that is really so interesting because I'm going back to that fascinating example you used of the ingredients in the bottle.
Yeah.
Some of us obsess with looking at the ingredients before we buy food.
Yes.
Other people completely ignore it.
Yes.
But it is there, and it's a choice that you make. Do you see that kind of a world where, let's say, every time an ad pops up, we made this thing based on 5 things that, or, every time a bank makes a recommendation, telco selling is something that literally that ingredient pack appears next to it? We have some rudimentary versions, someone will say, did this because you like something, I'll show you this.
Yeah, but it's usually if there's a negative outcome. So if you've been rejected from a bank, you didn't get the loan you applied for, you want to know why. So why is he getting it, not me? And for sure, there's been lots of discriminatory practices that go on within banks. Part of my life inside of a bank was revealing truth and fairness in lending, which is a legal position that the US government takes. The government will come down on a bank like the hand of God if they are discriminating along gender lines, racial lines, people with disability. They will make calculated decisions as a business around earnings. It's like, well, this individual doesn't make enough to pay back $1 million loan, so we're not going to lend them $1 million. But you need to understand why you're being denied something for whatever that institution's position is. And I think if it's a piece of negative news, most people will interrogate that because it will not be a satisfactory answer. And whether that's a health thing or a commercial thing, or it needs to be explainable. And that's why I think spending a bit of time in around ethics and AI, how companies need to have good baseline understanding of how AI is being used so that they can explain it to their customers. And just to loop back around to medicine again, if you or I were to fill out a card that says, I will donate my organs to charity in the event of my passing, that's like a goodwill gesture to help another human. You might have great kidneys, great lungs, great heart, great something. So that only happens when you pass. You wouldn't do that so easily when you're alive. It's like, wait, I've only got one and I'm still using it. But when it comes to data, it's transferable. And I think what Google's been doing is quite good and quite clever, is that they say, we'll use your data in an anonymized and aggregated way so that we can have more sophisticated models for society. The people who live in this village eat mostly vegetables. The people who live in this village eat mostly meat. Why is there more cancer in one than another? That type of large-scale medical modeling at a societal level. So for individuals to give up their data, it's like, well, I haven't lost anything except a bit of privacy, as long as it's not used against me in an exploitative manner by an insurance company who may be looking for reasons to raise my premium or deny me insurance. So I think there's benefits when it's well positioned, well presented, and well delivered. But there's clearly a lot of privacy issues.
There's a whole aspect here of. Sorry to interrupt you there, but I think, and I'm just so fascinated by some of the things you're saying. There's a whole aspect here of privacy, but I'm going to come back to this idea that you talked about in banking and lending and the way it works. I think in mathematics, basically, you can set a function for what you call precision or recall, right? Meaning I want to go very narrow and I want to make sure that I'm absolutely right. Or I set it for recall, saying I want to show you a lot of discovery. We talked about discovery and the randomness of discovery in the beginning. And you can't do both. I mean, an algo can do one or the other. And normally most machine learning people are trying to say, where's that fine balance when I'm kind of maximizing as much as I can on both sides. But it strikes me, Ian, that most businesses in the world today, whether you're a social media company, whether you're a search giant, whether you're an advertising company, are interested in the precision, in the repetitiveness, saying, if you did this, I'm going to show you this again and again because I want to sell you something. And that leads to an unknown bias, because the data can obviously turn around and say, these are the exact people who did it. Go and show them that. And you get that bias which is built into the AI, and we're not thinking enough about the discovery part of it.
It could be a large, I agree with you. It's very interesting. I mean, it could be a large scale confirmation bias, confirm for me what I'm expecting to see. It's, like a scientist who, I found the thing I was looking for. How amazing is that? I actually find I'm much more interested in the anomalies or the outliers. And if you're in mechanical engineering, you want to know why things are failing. I need to understand the edge cases, like that failed. Why? I need to know when came off that plane. We need to really get into, one plane in 100, the wing fell off. We need to understand the anomalies. So, but you can set the math to flag the anomalies if the anomalies are more interesting than the middle of the curve, the middle of the bell curve. It's, but also living in a place like Singapore, and I share this with great affection. Having built a few things before, you need to build for the majority so that your machine can process, your machine-driven process is as efficient as possible. And in Singapore, if you're a perfect little cube, you fly through that system at incredible speed, and the world applauds some of that efficiency. But if you're an edge case, you're an outlier, that I am a little cube with the corner knocked off it. It's like, machine can't process, and you need to be pushed out to the side and be treated a little bit differently by customer service or whoever's trying to help you get your thing done. And so that's why...
The fascinating thing about what you just said, it is not in the machine. It is in the way the human being is setting the machine to process the majority and not the edge.
It's in the parameters. So one of the things that I've been wanting to do for a while and finally got around to doing this year was I've become a student of AI with the view to teaching. And so this year we developed a course for Monash University in Melbourne called Design and AI. And it was fun. It was really successful. They're wanting us back next year. We're trying to replicate it. But from a design point of view, what that community of people latch onto and are interested in is quite different from what I'd call the harder core technical people who I spent a lot of time with them as well. But the designers were really interested in the human aspect. And a place we zoomed into was cognitive bias. And cognitive bias is huge right now because, one, it's foundational for beginning your AI journey, but it's really come to the mainstream in society as a whole in movements like Black Lives Matter, or how discriminatory society is in many, many ways. And so I find it very, very interesting. I cited a bunch of examples. You'll know them. They're out there about rudimentary machine learning platforms were discriminating when it comes in the hiring process. Now, I'll give you a good example. I'll give you a bad example. Amazon in Scotland, a bunch of engineers built an algorithm to filter resumes. And the data set they fed it was predominantly male. Because guess what? In engineering, it's a predominantly male landscape. So the machine just filtered out all the women, like women. And of course, you don't want to rile Scottish women. That certainly did. They had to shut it down really. they had to shut it down real fast. And they looked at it and they said, well, there was too much cognitive bias in the coding that was going on by males for males. And I say that because I got a daughter who's raised in Silicon Valley, and she's hypersensitive to these gender-biased environments and their points of view.
This is such a fascinating conversation we're having with Ian Miles of Area 51. We're going to be continuing the conversation in the next episode. So stay with us and we'll be back soon. Thank you very much for listening. We have new episodes coming out every week, sometimes twice a week. Each will seek to bring a different and fresh perspective to the topic. Please subscribe to the podcast channel and share it widely in your network. I look forward to speaking to you in the next episode. Meanwhile, stay safe personally in the age of COVID and stay relevant professionally in the age of AI.